Thank you very much, Martina, for sharing your research project with us. I think there is definitely huge potential there, and sort of worked on a lot of the ground, laying the foundation. I can see this being really useful in field applications for finds processing, and also as a teaching, certainly as a teaching tool, but then also actually in the field. And I'm sure people have a lot of other questions, but for me, just sort of thinking out loud, when you're dealing with fragmentary material, you might have some features, likelihoods of these features pointing towards certain vessel types and time periods, but also being able to link that information, so the chain of the decision, the decision tree, or the links that you follow through to come to a certain conclusion, be able to link that to the actual object, so that you have that transparency and you can see how you came to a particular conclusion, so that if you then need to go back and revise, maybe for a whole set of material that was processed, to take on board new information, that it's sort of clear where the decision tree sort of went wrong.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's much more elaborate than just building on what you started here. But I can see that there's tremendous potential. So
but you need more time.
But in terms of what other people think as well, let's open this up to the floor then.
Thank you very much, Martina. That was incredibly interesting. I have a lot of questions actually.
That's good.
Start with the description parsing mechanism. I was just curious about two things. First, where did you take the examples that you worked with? From the literature?
I
yourself?
Yeah, for example, the example I showed here was taken from the CVA. Then I also asked some fellow students to write me descriptions, but then I only got like 5 back. And then,
eliciting is always difficult.
Yeah, at some point during the thesis, I sat down and started to write my own descriptions. And I think it's like 300 descriptions that I wrote and tried to use them to shape the patterns for information extraction.
Okay. Related question: did you perform some evaluation about the system? How many information were actually extracted from? Correctly recognized?
No, not really, because as you can see, the knowledge base is very, very small, and so it was more like showing that you can do it, but it's at no point to evaluate it.
Sure, I have other questions, but I don't recall them later.
You choose a very specific type of ceramics, which geometric pottery, which tends to have like a linear development of styles.
Should be easy.
So it's a good example to prove the methodology and to test the whole idea of the approach. But I wonder and question you if you think that this system is applicable to all types, different types of archaeological material. One could imagine, like for instance, Roman wall painting tends to have a development and you can have a decision by saying you've got that motive, yes or no, and so. But I would assume that other artifacts are more complicated in their way of structuring. So I wonder if that approach is applicable in general to many different artifacts or just to a specific type of.
I think it is applicable to all topics that you can explain how you come up with some explanation why has it that age and not another one. Because when you say it is, let's say, 200 BC, then you have to say why it is. And if you can't, then, well. And I think if you can somehow explain it and write it down, then it should also be possible to store it in a knowledge base and make an expert system out of it. But it may be that the particular thing with decision tree, so using a decision tree as a knowledge base may not work for our topics. So maybe there you must use another system.
Maybe it should be, or it could be clearly used for typologies that are somehow accepted. So where everybody that looks at the vase says, yeah, of course this is an emperor. So there's not a problem in that there. Maybe, but on the other hand, maybe it could be also possible to use it in partial, I don't know, in finding the correct term for the description. So to say, building a decision tree in talking about the rim. So what type of rim do we talk about? Is it convex? Is it concave? How is it formed, and so on? So that in the end you can arrive at the point that the expert system tells you what would be the exact term for describing this object, and then you can build up your entire object like this.
Yeah.
And then in the end you can really concentrate on defining the object.
But I think for that you would also need the help of images.
Yeah, definitely.
And a different aspect is, I mean, one aspect about chronology is the relativeness to other things. So now you have, let's say, absolute statements saying yes or no, it's this category of form and shape. But if you talk about shapes, I mean, you already mentioned that it's slimmer, or so it's comparative to other stuff, you compare it. And do you see a possibility to integrate that?
Yes, I don't know. Yeah, I forgot to mention it, but it's written down. To use a certainty factor to weight the outcome or the rules. Or you could also use some fuzzy logic to say, for example, this vase is slim, but it's not that slim. It's only like, say, 50% slim, and with that you may come to terms with.
And possibly another thing we could benefit from is a controlled vocabulary. Those good terms. I think it's very interesting to me because I'm something like that right now.
Yeah, I also, when I was reading Coldstream and other authors, they have different name for the decoration motifs. So you have like slanting lines and all that, and they're slightly differing from author to author. That's why I also thought of using a thesaurus to look up the specific or best suiting words. Yeah.
You talked about further development, and, but you were quite uncertain about the further development. I understood that this was your thesis work for a Magister.
Yes.
Are you now working on a doctoral thesis, or and
not with this topic?
Okay, so you keep on working on the system, or is it more now like a hobby which you can do when you don't have anything else?
Yeah, that's
like organizing digital classicist seminars.
Yeah, it's more the second one. If I have time and want to, then I would work on it. But since finishing the thesis, I didn't do much on it. It's a time question.
This comes, or this leads to the second question about the licenses. So
you can have it if you want.
Sorry?
You can have it if you want.
Yeah, I mean, is it on an open repository?
No, right now it's just on my computer and at the archive of the university on some CD. So that would be the next thing I should do to publish it. Maybe maybe I can upload it somehow into the Digital Classicist seminar homepage and link to GitHub. Why not?
Well, better might be the English wiki, the Digital Classicist wiki.
As well.
Yeah.
This is the week to do it, because as Matteo will tell us all, this is open access week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do it tonight. Your answer brought up a next question.
Okay.
You said that the program can be found in the archive of your university.
Yeah, when you give your thesis to the professor, I also gave them a CD, and you have to give them 3 copies. One that goes to the people looking at your work, and then one that goes to the Prüfungsamt.
Yeah, but so you gave them a CD and a written paper.
Yes.
Okay. The written paper was the documentation of the program, or?
No, it's more the theoretical parts. And this is mainly that what I told you. The documentation is in the program. There are a lot of comments in it, and I think some parts still need a bit of work.
Coming back to your point with the likelihoods and to Felix's point with this slimmer, so what happens if you actually don't know the answer to a question? And I was also a little confused by the expert system answering, well, it's likely that it's something, but the limited expert system, know that there are exceptions. So how does this come together?
Yeah, that this part with the expert system saying I'm not sure or it may be likely. This is just well, let's say it, there are psychological reasons, because if you say it is that, you can't find, it won't be accepted. And also in archaeological research, then people also always say it's most likely and not it is. And the part with when I don't know the answer to a question is something I may have thought about while programming that program, but got lost. And if you don't know the answer, then what the program could display is to say what's the part of the tree coming all below the question that you can't answer, so that you might find a range that may be answered, or otherwise, you would have to work with some certainty factor and say, okay, I'm not sure, but maybe it is this answer.
And is there a way of restructuring your knowledge base? For example, you had the first question and the answer was yes or no, I forgot, but then the system already said, okay, I can tell you everything I know now. So from an information theoretic point of view, the question is not very, what's the word? It doesn't contain much information. So would it be possible to rearrange the questions, for example?
Yeah. As I've shown, the knowledge base is this text file, and you could also just ask for the shape, for example, first, and later on for figures. Is that what you meant?
There's no automated way of doing this somehow.
You have to do that.
You explicitly have to say, well, I think my knowledge base is not optimal, and I make the conscious decision of changing.
Yes. That's why you normally have a knowledge engineer who builds the knowledge base in working together with an expert.
So what's the benefit then?
The benefit of the program.
Benefit, yeah.
As I already said, there are a lot of vases that are just undated, and with the help of the program and some human looking at the vase, who is not an expert, but who may use the expert knowledge of the program and may come up to a classification. So it's more like if you have an expert system, maybe compared to an electronic expert for some field. I know
it's very narrow. I mean, it's like yes and no, and nothing in between. And you've already asked it. So
yeah, that's because my knowledge base isn't that good. But if you would make it properly together with an expert and would really put more time and work in it and define it better and have more granular questions, then it would be like an expert.
Yes, for example, in many typological works where typologies are described, you often find, at least nowadays, these dendrograms, where you have, in fact, some kind of ideal way of going through a decision table to come to terms with a complex object, and that can start also with fragmentary objects that in fact just work a little bit into the direction of it. So the decision tree in some way is just the replication of these dendrograms. It's the same thing. It just helps you understanding how to go, how is my path through the dendrogram, and this is, of course, first of all, maybe interesting for students, for starting up with this. What she said, in fact, in the beginning, is something that can help educate archaeologists in understanding what is a typology, how ceramical types are working in my logic, or the expert's logic, in fact, and then it helps you. Of course, the in-detail question, is this the correct type that you give me, expert system, cannot be solved, but this is the same thing as if I take someone that used my typology, did it wrongly, but publishes as if he had done it correctly. So it's the same thing.
It's also, expert systems normally represent the knowledge of one expert. If you take like 4 experts and try to put all the knowledge in one expert system, they would be ending up in quarrels and discussions, because even experts are not always the same, don't agree always.
This is archaeology. So
Yeah, it's not only archaeology.
But that leads to the question. I actually like the idea of making explicit your arguments forward to a decision. That's basically is you mark this. You've got that shape, you've got that material, you've got that fabric, you've got that rim, and all that makes in your mind a decision to database or to classify that. And I like the idea of making that process of thinking explicit and labeling the criteria you use. So I was wondering to use this approach and enlarge the knowledge base, like commonly, and to make it growing by different experts, to have a common knowledge base and make it usable. But that probably would lead to the problem when we mentioned that you have contradictional approaches and comments on objects. Yeah. But it still would be a test to try.
And it would be some kind of interesting test also to see if my expert system gives me 2 or 3 different results based on 2 or 3 different decision trees of 2 or 3 different experts. We come already to the state of archaeological discussion, because it's this what happens. But this would need a much bigger knowledge base.
Yes.
It's the first step, but I think in terms of making this process transparent, epistemologically, it's a very powerful foundation. And really, this isn't clear in a lot of publications or typologies the way they're currently presented. So this does make it possible to, the reflexivity is tremendous, I think, with this one. I think that's a starting point.
And while encoding the expert knowledge into the knowledge base, you may also come up with some difficulties in the argumentation of the expert, and that's another way of some discussion between an expert and the expert having to think, why does he come to some...
Are you aware of the work of Stegelman Tart at the University of Oxford? And there's another individual, I think one of Melissa Terrace was working, I think, on this to some degree, but also one of her, I'll have to tell you later, but their work is also sort of dealing with this process of how experts do a sort of chain of inferences, and when you get more, few together, and how their discussions will help them actually reinterpret and come up with.
Okay, no, I've not heard of them. The only thing I know about is some system to classify coins, but that is image-based. And
Henrietta something quickly. Okay.
Is there an implicit assumption that terms like early geometric are universal, or if we take 3 different expert systems for 3 different opinions of 3 different experts, do we end up with simply 3 different?
You would.
ideas?
So in this example, I took the expertise of Coldstream, who says that early geometric is from this to this year, and who also says what are the main characteristics of early geometric vases. And if I also looked at other authors, and they have slightly differing opinions about that. That's only quite small. But yes, if you have an expert system and the knowledge base, you have to fix it to one expert.
So the question, continuing Dominic's question, is it likely, or can you expect somehow, if you run through the system with 3 different expert systems, is it likely that you will find differences in classification that are not obvious from the different approaches of the different researchers that you can already find when you read the text?
So you mean when I take 3 different expert systems and I have one object I want to date with, and put in an expert system 1, put in an expert system 2, and put in an expert system 3, and they all 3 come up with some answer, and so you mean if they could be different?
No, my question is, can I expect differences where I say, wow, that's something that I couldn't infer from reading the 3 original authors that I'm modeling with my knowledge systems?
Yeah, I think it can happen because, the authors write it down in some natural language written text, and in the expert system, it's very logical and well defined, and then it may be that you get to see some differences.
I don't want to interrupt the discussion, but I think we should probably turn off the camera now and cut up and start line and let Martina wet her whistle. But for now, if you can just thank her for her presentation and